Rich Murray, thanks for being on the podcast. Welcome.
Yeah, haven't been on too many podcasts. Normally I say no to podcasts.
What was the main motivation to actually do a sport?
When you go and race the first time, you're like, oh my goodness, there's all these crazy, the best dudes in the world, and I want to take selfies with them, and I want to but I'm actually competing against them. And
Richard Murray is a professional triathlete and 3-time Olympian. Born in South Africa, he has overcome some major adversity to make it to the highest level in the sport, including being diagnosed with A-Fib.
From South Africa, give it up for Richard Murray.
when I was a kid, I used to go out partying and the next morning go straight to the race. Like the night before the race, I used to go, what is the hardest moment in your life? And I was like, well, I think when I thought I was going to die.
What does success mean for you, and what do you think has been the biggest factor in your success and you getting to where you are now? Guys, this is a brand new podcast, and the goal is to interview the most iconic figures in sport and health from around the world. But I need to ask you guys a big favor to please like and subscribe, because it would make a huge difference to the size of this podcast, and ultimately, the bigger the podcast gets, the bigger the guests. Enjoy this episode. Rich Murray, thanks for being on the podcast. Welcome.
Yeah, haven't been on too many podcasts. Normally I say no to podcasts.
Oh, really?
Generally.
Okay, I feel very honored now.
I thought, I know you, and I thought it would be a good chat. So, I think I've done a few podcasts, but I mean, it's not usually my forte. But now we're a bit more chilled, so the timing was actually, timing was good.
Okay. You told me a little while ago that you kind of getting ready to stop now, to stop competing. I don't know if that's still the plan.
Yeah, well, it's not like, I don't know. It seems like because after the Olympics, there's always like you have like the post-Olympic depression, and then I think it's probably not the best time to make decisions on like too much after that. So I think for the rest of the season, it's more like doing races that excite me and, races that I get something out of that really gives me something. So I think the last year or so, last 2 years has been like pretty flat out, like trying to qualify, trying to get nationality, like all the red tape, like everything was, quite a lot. So I think it's good to give it its time and just like, not make decisions under like serious scenarios. It's always good to give some time and then to see how the body and mind goes and then, take it from there. Okay. And I mean, you've just pretty much just come back. And how's the season in general been leading up to the Olympics? This is your third Olympics, right? Fourth
Olympics.
Yeah, well, okay. I've been to 4 and I competed in 3 because the one in Tokyo I went to and then never ended up competing actually at the games. So, I would say I felt like I've been at 4 Olympics and competed at 3. So I mean, I kind of had like the whole spectrum of like being a young kid going to the Olympics the first time, being like super wild, to being like the oldest guy in the field pretty much at the Olympics. Yeah, I've had like a full spectrum of like competing at the Olympics, which has been quite cool.
Jeez, so going back, like obviously now we've jumped forward a few steps, but going back to where it all started, I mean, coming from South Africa, now we're in Netherlands. Where did it start? I mean, I think the first time I heard of the Murrays was when your brother came around to the Andrews place, and he said, "Oh, doesn't someone want to come join me for like a quick 80k cycle?" And I remember thinking at the time, I was like, a quick 80k cycle, like, is he cooked? So that was the first time I'd heard about the Murrays, and then obviously later on we met. Where did your journey start?
I think the passion pretty much started when I was a kid already, like growing up in a farm outside of Durbanville, like Western Cape, South Africa, and pretty much being outdoorsy, active. My dad was super like active as well. He did a lot of motocross, enduros, that type of stuff. So we actually grew up like doing like a whole broad spectrum of different sports, like running, mountain biking, motocross stuff, enduro stuff, like downhill mountain biking, all different types of things. I think every weekend was like, what's happening this weekend? Okay, cool, let's go and do that. And so I kind of grew up doing like a broad spectrum of lots of different sports.
Yeah.
Even at school, like cricket, hockey, like lots of different things. So, I grew up like doing multi-sports pretty much as a kid already.
Okay. And, I think a lot of people would agree that triathlon is not the easiest sport for multitude of reasons. But I mean, like, what was the main motivation to actually do a sport that you told me at some point that the best races you have when you black out over the finish line?
I think the reason why I started to do triathlon was that somebody literally told me. So I was good at running and cycling, and I'm like, cool, good at running and cycling. Let's try duathlon. So it's like a real minority sport. It's like even smaller than triathlon. A lot of people probably haven't even heard of it. They're like, what is duathlon?
But you were world champ, right?
When I was a junior, yeah. So when I was 16, 17, I became, when I was 17, I won my first junior world title, like in duathlon. And it was against some of the guys that were racing triathlon back then already, and they were doing duathlon. And yeah, from then the following year, I became 2 times like duathlon world champion. And I was like, oh, you know, what now? And they're like, oh, well, duathlon's kind of a dead sport. Like, you've come into something that's literally, you know, they have the world champs, and that's the highest point of the sport, and there's no like series, and there's no mass sponsors really didn't care. And so I was like, oh, well, you know, this is something I'm good at, but not necessarily something I can like make a living off. And there was actually a guy who has a guest house in Somerset West, German guy, and he said, yeah, if you learn to swim, you can become a pro in triathlon. And I was like, oh, swimming, that's not my thing. Like, that's rubbish. I don't want to swim. And I really like hated swimming, and I kind of like that for me was like the massive hurdle, like to try and become a good enough swimmer so that I could earn and make a living doing the sport of triathlon. First I was like saying I'll never do it, and then like 3 years later I'm like, oh, okay, I want to go to the Olympics for triathlon. And so it all like really, you know, fast forwarded super quickly. And then, in 2010, like I decided to try and go pro as a triathlete. And I was like, okay, I have to go to altitude now because all the pros are being at altitude. So like packed up my Golf 4 and drove to Potchefstroom, and I was like, became a resident of Potchefstroom more or less, just living there training. And that was like the humble beginning, I guess. And I think my dad gave me like 2 years to earn a living doing triathlon. I thought, okay, this is a big challenge to try and like...
How old were you at the time?
22, 21.
Okay. So not like you weren't... I mean, you were young, but not that as young as you could have been at that point to switch sports.
Yeah, I think so. When I changed overall from the swimming side of things, it was like, okay, you started swimming when I was like 17, 18, which most people think is like, I don't know, they say way too old. Like most people start when they're kids. When they're like 8, 9 years old. Like,
so wait, you never learned to swim as a kid?
Not really. No, I mean I could swim. Like I could stay above the water. You know, I could not drown. But I wouldn't technically call it swimming. I could stay above water. And no, I think like then I think when I was probably like 4 minutes off the pace on swimming already. Like when I started, so I was like miles out. And so I knew it was going to be like the biggest challenge for me to like to swim, because I knew my running and biking was at par or up with some of the best guys in the world. So I knew that if I got there, the chance of doing well was high. I mean, not blowing my own horn, but it's like, I don't know, if you know that the end of it's there, you just got to figure out the rest. Then for me, that was like the initial process of like, okay, I can do this, but it's going to be super hard, because someone told me, it's going to take 5 years for me to get my swimming up to scratch. Which I was like, wow, that's like going for a degree or like a master's or whatever. So, okay, well, maybe this is my master's that I've got to hand off in 5 years, and had to go through like all different coaches and different environments of swimming and trying to figure out what would actually really bring me up from, where I was to where I wanted to be. And so I think that was like the initial challenge, because I think you have to have like a challenge where you think like, can I actually do that? Like, is this achievable? And I think when you set that goal for yourself, like, is this achievable? Then, you know, you need to put the steps in place to get there. So I think that's like the whole mentality with, well, I suppose a lot of things in life. If you always think it's a bit scary to do it, it's probably a good idea. So I think...
That's why I'm starting this podcast.
Scary moments, like, you know, they yield strong people. And I think... that's one thing where, I mean, I thought it was quite fun and something completely different. And I wanted to actually get into like pro mountain biking, and I was like good, but I wasn't like with the best. And I thought, if I'm not the best in the country, like overseas, I'm going to be nowhere. Luckily, I had seen what, you know, triathlon was like. I went overseas a few times when I was a junior, and I like realized, wow, like you can be the best in the country, but overseas there's like 100 dogs out there that will just eat you up. And I think that's, when I saw that already, I thought, wow, okay, there's a lot of work that needs to be done.
When was the point, or was there a point where you really I mean, obviously as a kid, you know, you did a lot of different sports for fun, and you want to do well. But when was the point where you it really started to cross your mind that maybe this could actually be a career?
Wow, I think it probably took about 2 years. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think when you're a young kid, you don't really think past, tomorrow. It's tell the honest truth. Like, where am I going to get groceries from? How do I get there? I think as a kid, you don't overthink it too much, which sometimes is, in one sense, good. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of the time you can overthink yourself so hard that you actually don't even end up putting your foot in the door and giving it a shot. So I think it probably took about 2 years. I think when I started getting on the podium within the second season of racing the highest level races in 2020 or 2021. Mm-hmm. Sorry, 2012, not 21. That was like 3 years ago. 2012. That year I got on like 3 podiums in the World Series, and it was like massive prize money, and I was like, shit, I earned like 50K. Like, this is crazy, I was like, wow, this is as like a 20-year-old.
Feel like a
baller. I was like, yeah, now I can buy expensive, buy Rolexes and throw them. No, I'm not that character, but no, I think that was kind of where it kind of started. And then at the end of that year, then I signed with like some big companies like Red Bull, like Specialized, BMC, kind of like. Well,
that was what I was going to ask you about Red Bull. Like, what year was that you signed with them?
2013. Okay, is when I started with a couple of big companies with with Red Bull, Specialized, with
and that must have
Oakley,
been,
with a couple of
I would assume that's sort of like the point where you're like, okay, I'm here now.
I think 2013, but I think the first year you have like the initial coming in year, and then you get like seen, you can be like with the best guys in the world.
Yeah.
And then I think from that moment, then that's, then some people start knocking on the door, and then you got to like, okay, well, see, is that now like, is that going to work or not? And I even had like one company like right before the Olympics, like come knock on the door like couple weeks out, and I was just like, no, because I'd asked them before, and they were literally like, no, we don't need you. We have a whole bunch of guys. And then literally like 5 weeks before, they're like, hey, do you want to come on board? And I was like, give me a phone call at the end of the year. We can talk business. But it was, I think, it was always like, quite a crazy moment. And I think, those moments probably never forget. Like it's the moment of like, okay, I've actually, I belong here. Because I think when you go and race the first time, you're like, oh my goodness, there's all these crazy, the best dudes in the world, and I want to take selfies with them, and I want to but I'm actually competing against them, and I think that there's like
it's like this bit of this imposter syndrome.
It is like, and then eventually after a while you're like starting to shoulder with these guys, and you're like, oh, actually I might take you on, just get out of my way, bro. And you start. I think it changes very quickly with the type of thing, but I think one thing in the sport, at least triathlon, it's like, I don't know, it's quite inclusive. Like everyone is, kind of friendly with each other, and it's very like, I mean, it's a smaller sport, so it's not, it's growing now still as well, especially with the long course stuff and like the T100, like the longer distance stuff. It's like, it's definitely growing. Like if you look back like 20 years, if you said you'd be a professional triathlete, people think you're insane.
Yeah.
Like I think my grand and other people, like I think people still do that now. They're like, "Are you still like running around in lycra on television?" They were like, "Aren't you going to get a real job, like, and stop living with your parents?" But I think like the sport, like the internet and marketing and social media and stuff has really like allowed sports to blossom.
Yeah.
Whereas before it was, you might be in the newspaper or someone might have heard of you. But it was very low key, like very, very small. So I think the internet and those things has its positives and negatives. Definitely think.
Yeah, it's been for me, and I've seen how it's changed. The landscape of sport has changed a lot in the last 10 years. Since the introduction of social media. And on the one hand, it's given people opportunities, but it's also created this whole other side and stress and more work. And before people just focused on the job at hand, competing and training. And now there's this whole other world of, creating content, and you always got to be on all the time, and often you're signing contracts, and in your contract it's like, okay, how many posts are you doing, and this, and it's like, I'm actually supposed to be in your case, triathlete or downhiller or whatever. I could imagine that it must have been quite daunting, like, in the beginning when you first go over to Europe, and you mentioned that the level was so different. I've experienced that myself. Was there ever a time that When was the sort of hardest moment for you? And was there ever a time where you thought, I can't do this, or I don't want to do this?
Yeah, so I think there's been different moments during my career, and it all changed. So like at the start, like when I started to race in Europe, I was like, okay, I have to be in Europe because I can't be traveling like up and down. The travel, the expense of the travel was too much. Like the jet lag sometimes with time zones coming backwards and forwards South Africa. That was all too much. So the one big thing, I think, having to spend Europe's in summer like alone at the start was like the biggest, one of the hardest parts, because it was like, I know I need to be here because this is where all the racing is, but where am I going to be, you know? And I think that was pretty much the start, one of the hardest parts. Luckily after that I joined like international training group, because I was like, I have to join a group of people, because on my own it's pretty boring, number one, and then also super lonely. So I think to find that group that I trained with, so I trained with Joel Filio, and there was a whole bunch of international guys, and I was like, okay, well, if I want to be the best, I've got to train with a group, the guys that are, motivated every day. There's no ifs or buts. If we're going to train, they get the work done day in, day out. And we trained with that group for like pretty much about 5-6 years.
Okay.
Which was, kind of the sweet spot of my career, more or less, which is actually great, because I think from 2013, 2017, in that range of about 5-6 years, that was like the best part of my career. And I think that was a pretty tough part. And then I think obviously then after that was making a decision then to be more in one place, because it's like you travel everywhere, and now you actually don't want to travel everywhere anymore. You actually want to be in one place. And I think you always have this push and pull of like, where do I really want to be? And during this time, and obviously spending a lot of time overseas, also had that question of like where home is, like, where, and you're like, oh, wherever my suitcase is or wherever my bike is. And you have that feeling of like, okay, you actually start getting a little bit confused where home is, but it starts becoming everywhere, and it starts becoming, your life, and your life changes. So I think that is probably the toughest part, like spending time away from family, friends, South Africa. Those like became a tough part of the sport. And I think that's, one thing that's probably not spoken about too much, because a lot of people in Europe, you can be at home, which makes it easier. But if you're from like, America, New Zealand, South Africa, it's very far to come to Europe. And
I recognize that as well. I mean, just the Europeans, and they can go home between every race. And I think people don't realize how much of an effect that has on your mental health and everything, just seeing friends, seeing family, being in your like safe space. And for everyone else, especially South Africans, Australians, anyone, you've got to come over, and you're living out of a suitcase for 6 months and on your own. And I think it's interesting that how you guys are still able to succeed, even coming from that situation and not having the comforts of home. But maybe that gives you more drive, motivation to make it work, because you're sort of in this must situation. You mentioned that your best years you feel were sort of the 2013 to 2017 range. What would you say has been the best sort of moment? I'm sure there've been a few. I know that you were fourth at the Olympics, right?
Yeah. In Rio.
And what would you say is the best moment that you had?
Yeah, I'm quite fortunate to have some good moments, because I noticed out of the career you have about like 3 years that end up being like injury, illness, sickness. So you have like probably like 20% of your year of your actual pro career, you're going to have tough times, and then you have some amazing times which come in between the bad times as well. So I think getting on the podium when I started my career in 2012, like that was one of the biggest moments. It was like, shit, I'm here. I'm like starting to like knock on the door, being like one of the best, and that was like a real special moment. And then qualifying for like my first Olympics, like I don't even know how to qualify for the Olympics. It's funny. And like I get like 2 months before, like, hey, you're going to the Olympics. I'm like, what? I don't even know how you qualify. Like, okay, that's cool. And so like I think those types of things like were pretty scary and amazing at the same time. And the experiences from those, like the biggest part of it, like I realize now, is the experience that I'm left with versus the actual results that I got. Because I think the results are one thing, and when I'm always chasing that result, you're either like super happy or you're really upset. But when you're chasing like the feeling and what it's going to bring you, it feels like you walk away happier either way. And so I think like the results as well. I'd definitely feature better in the shorter distance triathlon. So like they call them the sprint distance, where it ends in a 5K run. And my swimming was always off the mark, so that I would always be behind and have to chase. And on those ones, the swimming is shorter, so I'd have to chase less, and then I have a higher probability of doing better. And so I think on the short distance races I featured, and I got on the like a few times on the podium on those races, and like once or twice on the highest step, which was like the biggest achievements of my career. And then once in my career I managed to get an Olympic distance win as well in the UK in Leeds in 2000, and I think it must have been 19 or 17 around there. And before that I had like Achilles injury, and I had like sicknesses and a whole bunch of issues for 2 years before that. So it was almost like the biggest, after having the hardest times, having a big win after that felt like the biggest win.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think there's, going to the Olympics, I noticed like most of the Olympic games, I wouldn't say were not in my favor really, but I had like really, you're either like, you have the fit or fucked moments in when it comes to Olympics. You're either like on fire or you're completely destroyed, no one knows, and you rock up there and people are like, oh no, I haven't trained for weeks, I'm injured. And so I think, 2012 was my first one. I think I came 17th odd. And then after that, it was in Rio. And Rio, I broke my collarbone 4 months out before the games in Australia. And had like pins and screws put in my shoulder. And I was like, how am I going to get back in like 3 months to race the Olympics? I'm like, this is going to be a nightmare. And then like 2020,
but you got fourth that year.
Yeah, I got fourth that year after like 2 months of training.
So, I mean, that must. How did you feel about that? Because,
that was like, I think coming fourth, everyone's like, oh, we feel for you, you're almost there. And then like Henry Scoom, another South African, was one place ahead of me. So it's like, oh, the countryman like beat you by one place. And I was like, yeah, but like 3 months ago, I was like getting surgery in my collarbone and putting like 10 screws in the plate in. So if I think back from there to like coming fourth, I'm like, I would sign for that any day of the week.
Yeah.
So I was like super stoked with what ended up happening. And also I was almost lost out the water during like the swim, and I came out and the coaches were like, almost you could stop. Like they almost told me rather just stop.
What?
Because I was so far back. I was like
way.
1.5, almost 2 minutes back out the swim. And then on the bike we caught up, and then on the run I ran like, I think the quickest split like 30-40 seconds on the run.
Wow.
And so I didn't even know that I was catching up until like that position, because the run course was like that, and the coach couldn't really like tell the other athlete I'm catching him or he's catching. So I didn't know until the last 400 meters or 500 meters that third place was like 20 seconds up the road. So it's like, and then people say, oh, could you have gone harder, or could you have, like, of course, you always think afterwards, what could I have done? And be like, honestly, I went across the line and I was like, as I like you said at the start, almost blacked out over the finishing line. And then I think like when you've done that, there's nothing more you can give.
Yeah.
So then you can never be upset with giving your all. Because there's always going to be people that say, oh, you could have, yeah. Like, there's no ifs or buts, there's only the results. Yeah. And it doesn't matter who's racing. It doesn't matter what happened to other people. No one remembers that. No one cares. And so, like, I was super stoked with the fourth place. And, like, I don't think I've been happier with a result like that. And Rachel also got fourth at the Olympics. So both her and I got fourth.
That's good.
Which is, like...
That's quite crazy, actually.
But, and, like, 4 years later in Tokyo, she came fourth. And it was also like all people the same with her, and she said like she was super, super stoked. Like she beat people that she's never beaten. And so at the end of the day, if you walk away with a result that, you've done everything you can only but be happy.
Yeah. No, I think it's a good way. I mean, it's a good way to look at it. Not everyone would have looked at it like that. So I think you probably found a lot more enjoyment out of it. I mean, it's still fourth best in the world. Like it's a hell of an achievement. I mean, most people don't ever get to the Olympics, never mind get right up to the top of the field. I'm sure, I don't know, I know that from when you were younger, that you had quite a wild side, like to party a bit, and I don't know, I'm assuming that the triathlon world doesn't sort of lend itself to partying that much. I mean, was there ever like a wild after party story or something that happened?
When we started the sport, it was wild.
Okay.
After every race was like a massive party.
Really?
These were like the days when
the golden era.
The golden era when like Facebook came out and stuff, and I don't know, there was like you could go and party and nobody would actually know what you did because they would just see you there and everyone would be there and it would be fun.
Yeah.
And everyone would go and party. and the sport like progressed to the point that you couldn't do it anymore because your sponsors, and you couldn't do it anymore because there were other races coming up, and then it literally just died. Like it just became the sport became so professional that you can't risk going to party because your sickness, like you notice that you would get sick more.
Yeah.
You'd race, and that night you'd go out until like the police brought you home, and then then and then the people would be like, "Oh, you're sick," and at the end of the season you're like, "Man, why did I get sick so much this year? Like I have no idea why I got sick." And it could be all those nights you spent out on the drinking and causing trouble. But I think in hindsight, like those days were also pretty cool. Like even Rachel has the same thing. She's like, man, it's become so dry. Like everyone's become so professional, and they're like, oh, I can't do this. I have sponsor commitments, or I can't do that. And I think you also represent a lot more than you used to. You just should like kind of represent yourself. And I think the world used to be a little bit wilder a few years back. I think we're also getting older, honestly, to tell the truth. So I think the older you get, it's like, you're like, I want to go out. It's a typical thing of like over 30, you're like, I want to go out, but I'm tired and I'd rather go to bed. Like, because this is much better.
But like Netflix is calling my name.
Yes, I'm like, that bed sounds so much better than 3-4 o'clock rolling in the door. And no, I think it's like, it has its time and place. But definitely when I was a kid, I used to go out partying and the next morning go straight to the race. Like the night before the race, like we used to go Friday night, and my mates used to go back to bed, and I used to going straight to the race, like 5 in the morning.
Like insane.
No, like those were like, I don't know. That was like really like a period of like 18, 20 years old.
Yeah.
And then after that, I went to Germany and I spent some months there, and I was just like, yeah, I could do without this partying like stuff. It's nice, but it doesn't need. I mean, all my mates and everyone was like, wild.
You do
crazy.
feel a bit shit the next day.
I think, and then you get sick, and then you like, I don't know. They had this thing: if you just don't stop and you continue and you just go through, like you get rid of it quicker. So I don't know. I think your body could handle stuff like that in your 20s.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't experienced that, I must say.
I think in the 20s that you can handle it. In the 30s, there's no coming back, and you're going to be like in the bed for a week. But no, I think things changed as the years went on. And I mean, you learn to obviously preserve yourself more and become more professional. So I think you realize, you try and cut out the mistakes you make, and you look and you go, oh, that's a mistake. And you go, okay, well, eating a lot of junk food, or that's also, shouldn't be doing that. We should cut out some bad food and whatever, and all that stuff, and whatever, easy food and those things. And so I suppose during the years you should, learn from your mistakes in some way.
Yeah.
But there's nothing saying you shouldn't once a year. I think it became more like end of the season's done, cool, we'll go and have a party. So it became more responsible, calculated partying, which, I don't know.
Calculated partying.
Yeah, it's like calculated, but it became
it
felt like European partying, because it'd be like, okay, we're going to schedule this party for 21st of November because the season's finished.
Yeah.
And
and we're going to leave at this time, and we're going to come home at this time.
We're going to come at that time, and this is the taxi, is the number for the taxi, and
everything is booked and planned.
Everything is organized, and you're going to put your money in so everyone can put their money together into the pot. I think it's I suppose it's just part of life, really.
Yeah, so I've noticed it's pretty much exactly the same thing in the downhill world. I mean, it was a little bit also before my time, but that was a huge part of it. That's the sort of image they presented, was this wild bunch of hooligans that sent it down the hill and then had a big party afterwards, and they didn't train and da-da-da. And nowadays there are sometimes after parties, but it's very, very low key. Like there's really not that whole side of it has kind of died. And I think, it's just like triathlon, this professionalism has come through, and, sports are growing, and I guess it's a good thing. Yeah. But
even Greg is not like partying.
He's an exception. I will say he is an exception. I filmed with him earlier this year, and I mean,
I saw that.
People always told me that he's wild and he drinks and this and that, and I was just like, it can't be real. It can't be real. Like he's 4-time world champion. He's won all these races. Like it can't be. You can't perform at that level. Let me tell you, it is real. It is real. I experienced it. It's hectic. Like, he is an animal. And you can go out, and he's like out partying till late. And then the next day, he's 4 o'clock in the morning, he's on the road bike. Like, still hungover, and yeah. So I don't know. I can't do it. So
I suppose,
he's well trained, I think.
He's not just the goat. He's not just the goat, but he's like the goat.
He's the last of the era. That's
the last
for sure.
of the kind.
That's yeah. On the similar topic, partying, getting wild, I thought it's a good time to bring up. What's your thoughts? I mean, you see, I'm sponsored by ONLYFANS. Like a little bit of a controversial topic. What's your opinion about them coming into sport? Because I don't know if you know, we had some issues last year. Like the UCI were not, they didn't want anyone to compete with an ONLYFANS logo on, because in their rules or whatever, there's anything that can be related to adult content or something like that. So we had to, it was jumping through a few hoops. But I'd be interested to hear what your take on it is. And
yeah, well, I think there's a lot of, I suppose there's a lot of different companies that sponsor sporting events and things and stuff, and I don't think that every company gets like assessed. Mm-hmm. You know, it's not saying that there's anything wrong with ONLYFANS, but like I'm saying with like, say, even with oil companies or with like gas companies or like cigarette companies, alcohol companies, all those types of things, like those things are fine. Like, you know, that's perfectly fine. So it should be an open field, I guess. Yeah. Theoretically, and I think obviously like a lot of people probably doesn't know that like ONLYFANS does have like a cultural and like slightly different side of it as well. Yeah. So I think that's probably a good way to look at it. I think everyone probably expects you to get naked though on your bike. Yeah. I mean, which is pretty, that's pretty unique. But I think that's I suppose companies then try to get that brand out there. And then obviously work together with athletes and stuff and things, which makes complete sense because it's a different type of access that they're actually accessing through athletes versus just doing it themselves. So I think it should be free within reason, I guess. Or it could even be like a certain part of it which they have a slightly, not a different logo, but a different actual titling of things and stuff, so people know that it's actually related to that. Like that ONLYFANS cultural thing or ONLYFANS whatever, and then people go, oh no, it's like an education thing, I guess.
I think it's, like when you think back, you were sponsored by Red Bull. When Red Bull first sort of came into sport back, I don't know when it was, early 2000s maybe, it was not sort of freely accepted. A lot of people were against it because they're like, oh, this is, you're pushing, energy drinks unhealthy, you're pushing this on kids and stuff like that. And now it's sort of evolved into this iconic thing to be sponsored, to be a Red Bull athlete, So I think maybe that's also a sort of similar thing, when something's very new and different. Yeah. Some people love it and some people don't. And but I think especially for smaller sports, where it's not football, it's not rugby or whatever. I think it's only good when you've got more brands bringing in money into the sport and supporting the athletes, because it's hard,
It's hard enough as it is trying to get by. I think there are like probably certain ethical things that you probably like, I don't know, you wouldn't want to get involved with certain things, I guess, in there. I know there's some certain things where I looked and I'm like, I would rather not. Yeah. But I think all within reason, it's all like a personal thing as well and a personal choice, more or less. But I think most people, when they work for a company, as somebody's daily job, they won't think like, do I believe like this brand that I'm working for? Do I believe 100% or do I need to pay the bills? Yeah. Like what is the difference? Yeah. There's no difference. Like it's the same thing. And obviously as an athlete, you're influencing people. Yeah. So you're connecting with those brands and stuff. But working for a company is pretty much identically the same thing.
That's a good way to look at it. And I think, the world is so open-minded now. It's the 21st century. Things have. Like, if you look at what's on other social media, also Instagram, on Twitter or X now, what it's called, I don't think you can see anything anytime you want. So, yeah.
It comes down to preference. It comes down to what you're looking for and your preferences, really, in life, I think. I think as an athlete, you've obviously got to be smart to make sure that you have endorsements and you have people that are backing you and from a professional side of that, that's, that drives the sport. If there weren't sponsors, people sponsoring sport, athletes would need to get a job.
Yeah.
So a lot of smaller sports and things, you have to run a job by that as well, which means you can't really be all you want to be. So that was the one thing we also noticed, like you need to weigh up, like, okay, well, how am I going to structure my yearly income? Like, where is it all going to come from? Like, is it going to come from prize money? Is it going to come from sponsors? Is it going to come from charity stuff? How am I going to like work out the whole year? And you've got to have, sponsors and people backing you in order for you to have like a little bit of, okay, I feel okay because I have some backing and now I need to work hard to get the rest.
Yeah.
So it's definitely important to have sponsors and have obviously people looking after you. And it's also, not just sports then, it's also more marketing and getting involved with companies. You learn a lot of things, which is also good for the long term. So.
Speaking of people looking after you, when exactly did you meet Rachel? And how did that sort of come about?
Yeah, so I actually met Rachel in 2013 for the first time in Bloberg, actually, of all places, in the Western Cape. And they happened to be. I actually met her on Facebook first because Facebook was a thing then. That was like. Facebook Messenger was a thing, and we started chatting there, and she came to do the African Cup in Bloberg Strand, and we both did the event there. We both won, and then we started getting to know each other there. And then from there, she was still training with the Dutch national team, and I said, oh, maybe you should come over. I'm joining the international squad with Joel Filio and a whole bunch of other top athletes. And then the end of that season, then she decided to then join the same squad, and then literally from there, we were like living together from like a couple months in already. So
this is like 2013.
Yeah, 2013. So within like.
So that was what.
A few months.
I guess the main decision to actually move to Netherlands specifically.
Pretty much, yeah. Okay. So and then it was like, okay, Rachel was actually living in the south of the Netherlands with the National Training Center, and when I went down there, and we were both like, oh, we're in like a 20 square meter room, the two of us with all of our stuff, bikes, everything. I was like, this is very cramped for two people in 20 square meters. I was like, I'm not sure we could really do that with bathroom, kitchen, everything.
You're talking like as big as this room.
Yeah, it's about probably maybe half a size bigger than this room.
Sure.
So not massive, and we were a little bit like, I'm like, oof, I don't know if I can live in a city. Like, I feel really claustrophobic. And then she said, oh, well, my parents got a place in the east of the country, maybe we can move back there. And so we decided to actually move here, kind of the end of 2013. And we came in here, and we've pretty much been living out here since 2013, which is about 11 odd years. And it's been pretty good because I was definitely not saying I was looking for somebody who was living in Europe, but I definitely knew that like having a girlfriend in South Africa all the time became an issue because I was always traveling, and it always became like, I feel bad, and then the relationship would end, and eventually I thought I need somebody who's doing what I'm doing for the next 10, 20 years, and hopefully then we can then continue for the rest of our lives together. And that was literally like, okay, I needed to look at professional triathletes around there, which ones
so you
professional triathletes,
like a catalog, you were
more or less. And then I looked and I thought, okay, wait, how many of these people speak English? And that like it whittled down even less.
Oh man!
And I think funny. No, it sounds like the most business proposal thing ever, but I kind of looked at it and thought I need to think about this because.
Well, I met my partner on Tinder, so that's the modern age now.
That's kind of like, okay, well, I want to live in Europe, and like because when I came here, I thought, I kind of like this, like it's organized and things work and
the lights are on.
There's electricity and there's all these basic things and like there's obviously a lot of things that like the weather is one thing to get used to, and like the cultures are completely different. And over the years I started to like kind of learn how things go and how things are run and all those things. And then eventually that was kind of like, okay, well, this is probably where we're going to end up. And so I think that was kind of like how the whole process moved forwards. And then it was like after the 2021 or 2020 Olympic Games, I decided like, okay, well, we really want to live here in the Netherlands, and it would be pretty good for me to start representing the country. I had like Dutch coaches for the past 5 years before that. I was traveling with the Dutch national team everywhere.
You weren't getting any support from the South African team?
No, I was getting support.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was getting support, and I was still traveling with the Dutch national team. So,
okay.
So my things were getting covered. So there was a very good, period of time where like pretty much all the expenses were covered over time, which was extremely good.
From South Africa?
Yeah, from South Africa.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so it was. I mean, there were a few emails backwards and forwards, but at the end of the day, things would actually get covered, and that was like amazing. So it was like, for about 4 or 5 years or so. And then, after Tokyo, it was like, okay, well, I want to live here. I want to start a business here. I want to start my life here. And we had been married already for like a few years. So it was then the decision, okay, for then me to then move across and start making a name for myself here as a citizen. Because I think in the long term it would help a lot. And also it feels odd to having like living in another country or always be a foreigner. Even though you're there, and like even now that I've still got, probably for the next, the rest of my life, I will always be the South African who is now Dutch. Yeah. which is okay, because I think part of your life is like, you pick up parts of the world and you actually take those parts with you to a certain degree if you're allowed to do that. So I'll always be South African, but I'm also Dutch. So it's like you can't like, it's not like I'm like a traitor because I left the country, because I still love the country, but it was more a decision on my future, which I think not a lot of people would know. Like at some races, people are like, "Oh, I'm a traitor," or like, "Why would I leave?" or "I'm a bad boy." I've heard like lots of different things, but it was more like a life decision than anything else, because it is like the country you represent. And it was like, I felt like I'd also been helped here a lot because my coach is Dutch, and I was traveling with them. So my infrastructure was actually Dutch for about 5 years.
Sure. Okay.
Which, they didn't charge me like a cent for doing any of that.
Amazing.
So it's, and then that's like, in a way I'll need to then, give back one day with that regard as well. And we want to start like, obviously a coaching business. So I started coaching like 2 years ago already. So I've got a couple of athletes that I coach and I keep track of weekly and stuff. And so that is like the beginning. And I studied coaching and conditioning for sports before I started as a professional triathlete. And so then that's like then obviously the next step in life.
That's one of the questions I was going to ask you as well.
Which is kind of the next phase, I guess.
And when is that? I mean, have you got to the point that you're officially retiring, or are you still competing? This year?
So this year, I mean, I still competed in quite a couple of like the events that I needed to do to qualify for the Olympic Games. And then for next year, like, I mean, I don't want to like call it 100% because there's nothing worse than like saying you're retired and then you want to come, then later you realize, oh wait, maybe there's a little bit of juice left. You never really know.
It seems to happen quite a lot, actually.
I think it seems like it's happened to like maybe one every 3 athletes, I would guess, maybe more, unless you're a female and you're getting kids. Then it's probably more, definite. But I think for the end of this season, it's more about having some fun races, having an off season, focusing on other things, because we just bought like a farm here in the Netherlands, which we haven't announced like all the plans on that yet. So we haven't really like announced what we're doing with it yet, which a lot of people probably guessed already. But that's taking a lot of energy and a lot of time. So I think, realistically, like you've got to look into like how much time you have available, how much energy you have available to do everything. And so start of next year, we're still going to keep things rolling, because I think to stop is actually also not good. So it's better just to wean down from maybe like some super serious events for some time and do some events that excites me and makes me excited, because I think there was so much pressure trying to get to the Olympics that you start losing the enjoyment, because it's like this has to be done and that has to be done, and the nationality stuff to transfer over to South Africa, to the Netherlands costs so much energy like that. It was almost like, is it not really worth me spending this amount of energy trying to compete at the Olympics? Because in South Africa, my birth certificate was gone, and that took like 2 years to get a new one made.
Holy moly!
And this was all now like since 2022.
Your heart surgery and all of that. Which year did that happen?
That was 2021.
Okay, and
Yeah.
maybe you can take us through what happened and how it's sort of the effect it's had on you as an athlete, and also dealing with everything, and also what's motivated you to come back to racing after that.
Yeah, so I think that was pretty much one of the toughest moments. I think my family actually asked me they're like, what is the hardest moment in your life? Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, I think when I thought I was going to die, because I had got a heart condition in 2021 in South Africa. I was like swimming in the swimming pool, and I've got some goggles that's got my heart rate in the goggles. I could actually see like my heart rate.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, and it's got pace and got everything and stuff.
That's insane.
And so you can actually keep track and see what zone you're in while you're swimming and stuff, and the pace and everything. And I was swimming and my heart rate was just sitting at 160, and I was warming up and I was going like, why is my heart rate 160? And I was like, no, that can't be right. There's got to be something, maybe the sensor's out or whatever. It's got a Bluetooth sensor. And so I stopped and I told Rachel, I said, something doesn't feel right, like my chest. Like I had like this, like almost like it was a peck that was cramping. Mm-hmm. I was like, that felt quite odd. And then I just stopped and I checked my heart rate like 5 minutes later, and I was like, no, it's right. It's still 160. So after 5 minutes of doing nothing, it just stayed at 160.
Okay.
And so I was like, that's a problem. And then I got like out of breath, and I climbed out the pool, and I was like out of breath, and I sat on the side of the pool, and I was like, something's not okay here. And I checked my heart rate again, and it was like 50, and I was like, oh, something's really not okay.
50?
Yeah, so it would fluctuate between 180 and like 50 the whole time. And it was just sitting there, so it felt like racing and then nothing and racing, and I was like, went to my folks' place, and they checked it out with one of those like oximeters on your finger, and then like my heartbeat was like this a whole bunch of times, and then it was like a second or two of nothing, and then it was like massive bunch of beats and nothing. And we checked with literally phoned up a cardiologist, like, this is the thing, and he said, okay, come and see us like in an hour or two. We went over there, and then they said, they diagnosed me then with like A-Fib, which is like atrial fibrillation, or like kind of abnormal heart rhythm. Mm-hmm. And literally what happened was like in the chambers of the heart, like over the years, you start creating signals, like a node inside the heart starts sending signals incorrectly inside the chambers of the heart. And this actually puts the heart like out of rhythm, more or less. And the thing is, it doesn't know actually when to beat anymore. So you're literally fighting itself.
What's the cause of that?
And
or did they know?
So they don't really know, but it can be like a condition, like apparently 1 in 6 Olympic athletes or 1 in 8 Olympic athletes get it. Mm-hmm. So it's more or less just from racing super hard for a super long period of time, and then eventually you get it. So they say normally people get it when they're 50. Generally, like if people are endurance athletes and they've done it long enough, they get it when they're 50, but some athletes can get it like when they're 20 or 25 even. Okay. So it depends on like it's not like, I mean, trying to look into it, a lot of there's not much research on it really, but there's quite a few athletes get it, and now I've had like hundreds and hundreds of messages of people asking me they have the same issue and the same thing, and it's like everyone's very unique and it's different and specific to each person, I guess. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I had literally that in the start of the year, and I got literally told to stop sports, like get a normal job, like
wow,
your career's finished, like 2021. So and that was like in South Africa, and I was like completely distraught because like, okay, my career's finished, like 32, like now I need to go and get a job, like what am I going to do? And so like I went home, and this was now the year of the Olympics 2021 of Tokyo. And I'm like, okay, well, my Olympics is pretty much finished, that's done. This was like once it had already been postponed, so COVID and stuff and things like that was like still pretty fresh, and everyone thought it was from COVID and stuff and things like that, which I'd never had COVID before. And so, yeah, pretty much from then I was like, I don't know what I need to do. I need to take a break. They said I need to like detrain my heart, so pretty much get unfit.
Wow, okay.
Like
I didn't know that was a thing.
From the fitter you become, the higher the chance of it happening sometimes. So your heart grows in your chest to the point some people, the heart's so big that the signals start getting sent wrong. And luckily for my case, it wasn't that my heart was too big. It was just that the signals were getting sent wrong. And I had to go on medication, like blood thinning stuff for like a few months to make sure I didn't get like a blood clot, because the problem is from the irregular heartbeat, you can actually have like a blood clot, and then you can have a stroke from that. So, or you could have a cardiac arrest and die. So there's like pretty serious, scary stuff. Yeah, I didn't know what I was going to do. I was in South Africa then, just in my place, and I was like, mentally pretty destroyed. And I just had to figure out what I was going to do. And I was like, well, if I can get back to some training, and I had one of those, measures, reads your heart over like 2 weeks. So I had that, and they checked, and there was nothing irregular. And then like 3 months, like, because I hadn't had any episodes, but then literally it went back to normal, and I went back into normal rhythm, which was cool, and the body started to like chill out and relax, which was good. Then I thought I was good enough to go to altitude after that, because the team was in Namibia, so I thought, okay, let's go to Namibia. Went there, joined them for some training, and then I had like another episode of like heart issue again there at altitude. We had to go back onto like blood thinners and back onto medication, and I was pretty scary there. And then eventually coming through to Europe, I had to like, see what could be done. It was like 4 or 5 months out from Olympic Games. Like I'd qualified so I could go to the Olympics. The stress was all from that, but I had to figure out, and I couldn't train, like do any high intensity without having a heart issue again. So it was like quite a difficult thing to deal with. And eventually we decided, like it kept coming back, I had to go and have an ablation. So they're like go into the heart, and they kind of freeze the parts where the signal's getting sent wrong. And then like it creates scar tissue within the heart pretty much, and then it's the heart can then settle into a new rhythm over time. And so from that, then I had that done, and then literally like 3 months later it was the Olympics in Tokyo, and I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna go, but I don't know if I can rest individual, because I'm like 2 hours after having like having this, they call it a procedure, it's not surgery, it's like a day procedure. You go in, the next day you're out the hospital, so it's not like it's a heart surgery or anything. And a lot of people get it done, and I literally had that done, and like 3 months later was the Olympics. I went to the Olympics, and then I was like, I'm not doing the individual because it's 2 hours, it's too much. Like I don't trust my body and my heart to put myself through that so close after having the procedure done. So I went there literally only for the relay. In my mind, I thought, well, if I go for the relay, at least the South African team then would have a relay team, and they won't need to forfeit the team because we had no reserves. So I went there, and the other athletes, Henry Schumann, had like an Achilles injury, which we didn't really know about and stuff. And we got there, and then they were literally, it was like, in the individual races, he had to pull out during the run. His Achilles was completely destroyed, and they said, sorry, there's no team. You guys have to leave. You have to go home in 2 days. There's no relay. And I was like, my mental state went from being like trying to be positive, trying to be mentally okay there, to like, okay, now I'm completely crushed. Olympics is over. Go back to South Africa, and I don't know. The mind was just like, what next? What am I going to do? I like so much anger, so much frustration, couldn't do anything about it. And I think from that moment it was like, okay, well, I think I should move into a different environment. I think I should try something different, because like psychologically I needed a break from all the craziness that had happened at the start of the year. And I started doing commentary like stuff then. I was still doing some YouTube stuff on the side here and there. And I was just trying to like find out what the next step in life was, but just, trying to figure things out, because I think there's moments in the career where you actually don't know what you want to do. And you need to give yourself some time, just kind of think, what do I really want? What do I want to do next? And then I was like, okay, well, maybe I can try to go for the relay in Tokyo. Not in Tokyo, in Paris. So then the goal was, okay, cool, let's try and see. Like individual, I'm like, I don't think I could qualify anymore individually, just because of my heart and because of things. But I was like, maybe if I could switch over to the Netherlands and race with Rachel in the Olympic Games, that would be quite special. Like first husband and wife racing in a relay and triathlon ever.
That's cool.
Pretty special. Like in the village, like I thought that would be like a very cool thing to get to go and do. And like 4 years later, that actually ended up happening. So it's like, I think there's all those small little bits and pieces, and then it's like the individual race, like I knew that I wouldn't be where I needed to. And literally then like this year in Paris, like 3 weeks out, like I cracked a rib, like in training.
How?
Just from like literally the cartilage, like I foam rolled something because something was so tight on my shoulder. And I foam rolled, and then it cracked like between literally the cartilage and the rib, it like cracked. Like 3 weeks out from the games, I'm like, it seems like the Olympics is a plague for me, because every time the Olympics come, something breaks.
Man.
But and I was like, oh fuck, this is a nightmare. And so I think that was like, okay, well, it seems like there's always these hurdles you've got to get over, and it's like they're always going to be there. And you've almost got to just make the most you can with the situation sometimes. And I think you probably know that all too well, like having like hip surgeries and having so many crashes. And I think that's like, it's part of the sport, and it kind of teaches you the biggest lessons of the sport, is that the hard times teach you way more than the good times.
Yeah, it's 100%. And as much as injuries and things are really hard to deal with at the time, I think it makes you into a much stronger person afterwards. Once you get through that, and gives you the confidence that, okay, that was like, look at how I didn't know how I was going to do that, and now I got through it, and you get to the other side. And I think for everything else that life's going to throw at you, it helps so much, and also shows you what's important in life. Like, I don't know how you felt, but I know for me, when I got injured after racing was kind of everything, and then suddenly you think, you're not thinking about winning a race or something. You're just thinking about having a healthy life and doing everyday things, and that's like, you don't care about anything else, and your health needs to come first. And I think that also gives you more enjoyment for when you've kind of got that perspective. I think it also gives you more enjoyment, because I think as an athlete in any sport, it can be really difficult to deal with things when things don't go well. You feel like your whole world is falling apart, because it's like, okay, I'm Richard Murray, the professional athlete, and now my results haven't been good, or I've gotten injured, or I can't do this or that. And then you think, okay, what am I now without my sport?
Yeah.
And I think learning, for me at least, it helped so much too. It's hard, but to deal with that and come out on the other side and go, okay, I'm Stefan Golicki. The person comes before the sport, and I think that's, it sounds like you've sort of also kind of come to terms with that, and going forward into the next phase.
Yeah, I think that's I want to say maybe a part of life, that when you're young, you're hungry, you want to win. When you get a bit older, you start realizing like results isn't everything. Experience becomes more, and then when you get like near the end of your career, you'll be like, I want to enjoy myself.
Yeah,
like I want to be healthy. I want to enjoy myself.
Yeah,
and like so, I think it probably changes during your career, and I think that's what makes like a career, so special. And there's obviously going to be a point where it ends, It's not like, the magical grail, and then it's like, okay, then what's the next part? Like, okay, well, you retire and you got another like 50 years to live, or 40 years if you're lucky. Like, what are you going to do with the next 40 years, And I think that puts things into like the big perspective, and it's like, when you look and you go, okay, well, do I have like a roof over my head? Like, yeah. Okay, do I have like clothes on my back? Like, yeah. And you have food, and be like, you're actually very lucky, because like a lot of people in the world don't have all of that.
Yeah.
So I think you can always go back to the basics, like the essentials of life. And if you have those essentials, you're actually fine. And if things don't work out tomorrow, that's also fine. So I think it's to have a look on the long, in the long term, like there's always these little bits and pieces that are going to suck. It's just part of life. And it's like how you enjoy the sucky parts.
Yeah.
Because the sucky parts actually end up being the best parts. And I think at those moments, okay, they do really suck, yes, and you're really upset and you're angry and you hate life, and that's perfectly normal. And I think it was what makes life exciting and what makes it worth living.
100%. I think that's a good mindset to have. I can see that you get a different answer when you ask someone that at 20 or something,
Yeah, I suppose it's a very different. I think the age is definitely like early 20s and mid 50s is like is a different thing.
It's funny listening to you. I hear so many similarities to my thinking process over the last few years as well. So it's interesting, completely different sports, but I think mindsets across sport are quite similar in a lot of ways. I was wondering that, like with the heart thing, obviously very scary, serious situation, and is there risk that it happens again? I mean, what was your, I guess, main motivation to come back after that, even knowing the potential risks?
Yeah, so I think the one big thing was that like a lot of people have had it before. So at the start, I think, okay, I have something unique. It's only me. It's the end of my life. And there were like moments during the night where I'd wake up and my heart was beating like completely irregularly. And I thought like I was going to die. Like that happened a few times.
Wow, that's scary.
And like I woke Rachel up and I was like, fuck, I think something like is not okay here. And then it was like a lot of the time I would realize there was a lot of stress related things causing my heart palpitations and my life just being so busy that I actually caused my own problems. So it's like I had to literally almost teach myself, okay, like you can't be in control of everything. You can only control so many things in your life. And some things you can't control, try not to control them because you can't control everything. And the problem is I think it seems like you always look like you're in control, but actually you're not. We're actually not in control of anything. Like we control, what we do every day and we try to control all these things, but those stress and those things was probably causing the issues to a certain degree. And like I'm very like linear when it comes to like thinking, okay, here's a problem. How do I fix the problem? And like I try and eliminate some things, sometimes overthink the elimination of certain things, but I just try to look at it as the whole and go, okay, what can I remove or how can I try to change things so that I'm healthy, I'm enjoying my life. And I think that perspective changed a lot after my heart problem since it started, and like it probably will come back again. Like it's not like it's gone. So once you get it, it's a lifelong thing. So I'm going to have it when I'm 40, I'm going to have it when I'm 50. And so like I need to then obviously be smart about that and treat myself like, as I've told some other people, treat yourself with respect. Like be kind to yourself, be nice to yourself, try and like, have moments in the day where you sit and do nothing. Like people don't have that nowadays. Like it's just go until you burn out. And then you realize, oh wait, I need to stop doing that because otherwise I burn out again. Okay, that's a great idea. Let's probably implement some of that into my daily life. I think there's so many, like even now, like after we've like just bought a property and like down the line we want to get kids, and I'm like, wow, this is scary. Like maybe kids, maybe have a house, maybe try and renovate a house at the same time, maybe start a business at the same time, all of this all on top of each other. I'm like, oh, that sounds like a recipe for disaster. But I think to just try and do everything, like every day, try and get something done, and obviously remember to like take a moment to take a breather. It's also fine. Some days you just like, I can't do today. Like today is not my day. Like I'm going to just take a break. I'm just going to sit back and just take today. And if other people say, oh, you shouldn't do that, I'm like, well, this is what I need to be a human being. I'm going to need this time. And I think people are starting to respect that more than they used to. I think it used to be, oh, you're a soft, just, take some cement, then you'll harden the hell up. I think that's the mentality where it's like, I don't know, growing up in South Africa, that was definitely like, you're a man. Men get things done, regardless of the scenario. But I think people are realizing now that, men aren't stone. Men are stone. They have feelings, they have emotions, and that's fine. And as soon as you can allow those emotions to sometimes go out, then that's perfectly fine as well. I think one thing I've noticed in Europe, people can do that. They're very open. Some people are, how are you feeling? I'm like, oh, I had a shit day today. And like, people will say that. And people like, when they go back to South Africa, and people are going like, how are you doing? I'm fine. Someone one of my relatives died, but I'm fine. And I think that being more open has also like made me a little bit more, like if you're angry with somebody, you tell them, bro, I'm pissed with you. Like you're an idiot. And normally you wouldn't say that. So you build up all this stress that just, simulates for absolutely no reason, where if you can be more open, like I think that does make things more relaxed. And I suppose in the Netherlands, they're also like, people are super open. So now I end up saying things that I'm like, well, you can't say that. I'm like, well, I'm trying to fit in here. So then I've got to give my opinion.
But the Dutch are quite blunt. They say it as it is.
There's no way, two ways around it. And everyone's got their like opinion on matters. And it's very interesting because also like at the farm, they'll bring in there, people say, oh, you should do this and you should do that. And maybe you could change this and maybe you could put that there. And I'm like, oh, really? And then I'm like, oh, okay, they're trying to help because they're giving their advice of what could happen. And I'm like, okay, well, and that's the cultural differences where you've got to take off like, okay, South African hat goes off and then Dutch hat goes on, and then you know, and it's like it's quite. I think that's from the cultural side of things has been quite like opening, and quite nice. Like especially now we live like in the country, so like everyone knows everyone's business. Which in one sense you're like, okay, that could be a bit much, but then in another sense you need people's help. So like now we're starting to spend more time here, and we're actually like getting to know our neighbors and getting to know people and stuff, which beforehand we would never open up to because we were so flat out going. We didn't have energy to spend 5 minutes caring about what else goes on. So I think that's another new nice part of life, that we will learn to know our neighbors and learn to go and borrow stuff from them, and if they need help with doing something, we'll help them. And I think those parts of life we're also like looking forward to.
That's it's definitely a different, a nice part of the culture here, but it can be a bit of a shock when you're not used to it.
Yeah, I think when they heard that there was like an African, like Rachel had an African boyfriend, they were like, African? Is he?
I know.
like, no, you'll see. Trying to like fit in, How is he going to fit in? And I think also like I had to obviously like to get nationality, I sort of had to do all the Dutch civil exams for like reading, writing, all stuff about politics, like all the stuff I had to learn about, which took like quite some time, but it was like quite actually nice because you actually learn things about the culture and like, oh, that's how it works. And okay, that's why they do that. And I think there's a lot of things that people also do here together that in a lot of other countries they don't do, which is also quite nice, like looking after the elderly or I heard today as well they have a thing with like some elderly people where they want to go and do one last thing with their grandchildren. They have like companies that go out and help people to do that for the last time as well for their grandchildren and things like that. So there's quite a lot of nice, enjoyable things here as well. And I think like I find myself very fortunate to be in like both places. Which is also like, I mean, we have a place in South Africa, and I think people say, I race for the Netherlands, and I hate South Africa. Not true. Like, we always want to go back there, and we love going back there, but like, this is where we see the future. So it's it's nice to have both, and we want to obviously like set something up in South Africa where we start doing like training camps and we do things and stuff, so we come back and we can show people like how awesome South Africa is. Because whenever you tell somebody you're like from South Africa, oh, that's amazing, I went there on vacation, and then in the Netherlands it's like, oh yeah, we went there before, like Amsterdam, and it's very interesting how like different people like interact to where you come from. But it's very like fortunate to come from now come from both places.
Cool, man. So I wanted to ask you something that I want to ask all the guests, and that is, what does success mean for you, and what do you think has been the biggest factor in your success and you getting to where you are now?
I think kind of what I define as like success would probably be being able to do what you want to do every single day that makes you happy. So if you can do what makes you happy, then you're successful. And I think if you can inspire others as well and you can help other people in some way, then you're also successful. So because I think the most successful people I find is like people that give back, people that change people's lives. Having a service that's detrimental to society, or you're adding to society. I think that brings the most amount of success, feeling wise, for somebody that I personally find, like if I've done something where somebody says, oh, I did this because you inspired me to do that. Like I found like that was successful. Like results are a part of success, but it's not the whole part. Because I think people see the people standing on the podium and they go, oh, that's super successful. And be like, no, that person worked hard to get that success. So it wasn't like he just been like, here's your success. I thank you you may enjoy the success. You'd be like, no, that guy probably started like with mountain biking when he was like 5 years old and crashed himself to pieces and did that for a whole bunch of years. And then he became very skilled and then became successful. And I think it's when you're doing something for other people, like the same with like Rachel's father's like a doctor, and he like helps people every single day. I'm like, that must come across. You probably get used to it and it's normal, but like you mean so much for so many people.
Yeah.
That must be, quite something special to be part of. And I think like, as a triathlete, you're like worrying like about me. How can I be as good as I can make myself? And I think a lot of triathletes don't realize actually what they're actually like influencing. Because you get so caught up on like, I have to do this training session. No, so I can't come out and do this with you guys. Or I can't eat this or can't have a beer because I've got to train tomorrow. And then you get so caught up in that and you don't realize that when you go out and do sports, people look at you from the couch and they go like, I might go for a run tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then somebody will post something like, you got me off the couch. Like I haven't run in like months.
That's cool.
And you're like, wow, like, you actually help somebody to get off the couch and go for a jog because you inspired them and you felt like, I want to do something. And I felt like the Olympics and the sport really helps like promote health and wellness. And then that's also the reason why like we want to get into coaching and get into starting a business in sports so we can, get people out the door, off the couch and out the door.
Yeah. And
that changes, I find like that yields the biggest change. Like if I don't do sport for a couple of days, I can become an absolute douche. I can see it like in vacation, I become like a sloth and I don't want to like become lazy and I become like edgy and I'm like, why am I becoming this person? And I'm like, okay, because I'm not getting like, you get so used to the endorphins and so used to being active that when you stop or you get sick for like 2 weeks, you feel like absolutely horrible.
Yeah.
And so I think it's that like that balance of like, everyone when you're a top athlete, they expect you to perform. So you have always this pressure of, yeah, but don't you want to do this? And don't you want to achieve that? And don't you want to, and I'm like, yes, like those are part of it. But the journey leading there is the biggest, like the biggest part. It's like even going to the Olympics, like I knew this year, like the chance of me getting a medal, let's be realistic, was very small. Like everyone says, I'm going for a medal. And I'd be like, bro, you're always finishing in the 40s and 50s. How are you going to get a medal? Like, let's be realistic, bro. You're there to do your best and to enjoy what's going on. Because like at the Olympics, like we went there and I'm like, it's like, you're like this, you don't see anything. And then afterwards you're like, why didn't I enjoy any of it? Like, why did I focus so much that I couldn't enjoy anything? And like when I went there now, I was like, I did everything I could, but I wasn't being like over the top about it. I was like looking, and then you would see like the other athletes running like in the village, and then these people doing like weights and this thing. I'm like, these are like the best athletes in the entire world in one place. Like that's special.
Yeah.
And it was like in Paris, like in the city center, and there were like thousands of people, and it was like that environment was just so amazing that like I just tried to absorb all of that.
Yeah.
I knew my result, like I swam and I was out the back door on the start of the swim and my ribs were hurting the entire time. And I'm like, you know what? Like, I'm just here. I'm going to do what I can and try and soak up the environment because in 20 years' time, that's probably what I'm going to remember. Like, I'm not going to remember if I beat 4 guys ahead of me. I'm on the run. I'm like, I can get there. I can get to like 37th place.
Yeah.
That's great. And then I would have gone so hard that I couldn't enjoy the moment. Yeah. So it's, I think the moment a lot of the time is worth, if you're willing to let it affect you, is worth sometimes more than the result. It's the same with like doing media and stuff and things. If you're doing the media for the right reason, it's a lot more, fulfilling or helping than it is if you just go and you make a super cool short video or whatever that people go, oh wow, that's cool, and they scroll on to the next thing. It's not like the same thing with my YouTube channel, which eventually I'll start working on again. I had to put it on the backside. It was just with my heart complications and stuff, way too much to manage. Yeah, like I didn't realize that it took so many hours in a week, and then you're like, I post weekly videos, and then you cause anxiety because end of the week it has to be out, and you haven't filmed anything. Now you're stressing about it, and I'm like, I have to cut that out, and I have to try and, spend the energy on things that will make me feel better in the long run, and will just bring me more, because more is not always the best.
What did you think was there anything like that you think that contributed to you getting to actually where you are, and the success you've had, whether it's a character trait or, you know, outside help, or, you know, what do you think has been because I mean, so many people try to make it as a professional in sport, no matter what sport it is, but very few actually succeed and make it to the top level.
Yeah, I think probably one of the biggest ones, probably given talent, was like a big thing. I mean, my father was a runner, my family was super active, and like I grew up, I think, in the environment of my family, like very sporty, very outdoorsy. My parents were like, you know, super supportive. I like, if you come from South Africa, if you don't have supporting parents, you're going to be, to try and make it is like near impossible, I find, because you need to look after yourself and you need to make your environment like as best as you can. And like we have like the facilities and those things and stuff in South Africa, like it's not the best, and you need to literally fight for every cent that you're worth. And I think that fightingness is worth a lot.
Yeah.
Like that you can't put a price on, because if you want to get somewhere and you realize you have to do everything you need to do to get there, you probably have a high percentage chance of getting there than somebody who's just got everything organized and you're doing it just because you feel like doing it, not because you have to do it. It's the same like with the endurance runners, like in Kenya and those things. If they don't come home doing well, if they don't come home with money, the family starves, you know? And if you have that type of mentality, that if you don't make it, then you got to go get a job at McDonald's. Yeah. Then, you know,
extra motivation.
Your motivation to actually get there. And I think that's the one thing. Like when I grew up, I mean, I think when I was a early teenager, when I was 12, 13, I already drew like the Olympic rings when I was at school, and I was like, I want to go to the Olympics when I was like 12.
That's cool.
At school. And like through school, like I was good at track and field, like running and stuff and things. I was like a good runner already at school, and I had like the talent, and I was like, oh, maybe I'll try track and field. Like 800, 1500 was my thing, and I went to like national champs for track and field. And then I was like good, but not the best. And then I did mountain biking, and then I was like, became national champ in mountain biking, and I was like really like trying to figure out where I'd fit in and what the sport would do for me. And triathlon was really like a massive challenge, and I knew something that could be possible. And yeah, I think that drive then of knowing that this is like a make or break scenario. Like if I don't make this, then I need to go and do something else. So I need to like figure out how to get sponsors. Like how can I fulfill the sponsor contracts? How do I keep them as sponsors? How do I sell myself? Like all those things came into like almost like a business idea. I mean, it was never written down, but it was like I knew that these things needed to be done in order for me to become successful, because no one was going to go and be like, here we go, here's all the money, here's all the stuff, off you go. Like I think when my parents sent me like when I was about 18 or something, my parents sent me this side, and I literally had cash, no credit card, no cell phone. Came to Germany, 18-year-old kid,
crazy, sleeping
in like a school hostel. Like I was like, okay, I need to try and make this happen, you know. And I think when I was 18 already, I went to like a second division Bundesliga race, which the Germans have got like a racing league that you can race all year, and like the city has massive sponsors, and they pay the athletes start money to pitch up everything. All the expenses are covered. And I went there and I was like, wow, this is massive. And the guy's like, yeah, but this is only second division. There's still one more division up. And my brain was like exploded, because I went there and there were like 400 kids doing this one race under 18. And I'm like, I hadn't raced against so many kids before.
Yeah.
So I looked and I'm like, wow, this sport is so much bigger than I thought it was. Like I didn't. And back then when I was 18, it wasn't like you could go online and find that type of stuff. And so I think that spark was like the thing, like, okay, this is possible, and I could make like a career out of it. And I think that's the bell for dinner.
Oh, really? Okay.
It could be.
Yeah, that's a good place to end. That was the end anyway. Dude, thanks so much for making the time coming on. It's been cool. Really cool to have a catch up, and honestly, I found out a lot about your career. And I mean, hopefully we were chatting about making a difference. I mean, that's partly why I started the podcast. I'm hoping that, having conversations with people like yourself, would hopefully inspire people to, chase the dream and, push through the hard times.
Yeah, no, I hope it can. Yeah, I mean, I'm not, as I said, I'm not the biggest podcast fan, but when it comes to the right case in the right place, then, definitely. And I think, if I can, or we can inspire people, to get off the couch, to go and do your local park run, to go and run around the block, whatever it is, to make people feel better, then, I think we're doing something good.
Do a little clap to sync the audio.
That was iconic.